3, 2, 1.
All right, welcome everyone to our webinar today. We're talking about how Utah will get back to the new normal. I'm Arian from Kiln, and I'm grateful to be joined today by three wonderful, bright, and hardworking individuals who have been in the middle of the stream of helping us get back to our new normal. We all probably know Spencer Cox, our Lieutenant Governor. We're grateful to have you with us, Spencer, and appreciative of the work that's gone on at the state level. A lot of hard work over the last 2 months. Miles Miles Hansen is the CEO and President of the World Trade Center for Utah and sits on the Governor's Economic Task Force right now. And Margaret Bussey is a social impact and economic advisor and has worked at both state and local levels to improve the economic situation of everyday citizens, and also happens to come to us with some well-chopped degrees from Harvard, where she worked at the business school for a time, and also degrees in economics and public policy from BYU. So thank you for joining us, Margaret. Hopefully everybody can hear us just fine. I'm going to go ahead and start with some questions. We're going to keep this webinar to about 30 minutes, and we're going to try to be as specific as we can. If you have questions, you're welcome to post them on YouTube, and we'll do our best to get to them. So let's go ahead and start with Lieutenant Governor Cox. Spencer, can you just tell us, what does the new normal look like? What changes went into effect today, and what's the significance of those changes for business owners?
Well, thank you, Arian, and I appreciate your willingness to do this. It's very helpful to get good information out. So this idea of a new normal, and let me be very clear, we're working to get back to the old normal. But in the meantime, the question is, how do we live with this virus while it is here until we have the treatments and the medical interventions that are going to be necessary to allow us to get back to the way things were. And so when we look at moving from today, officially, as of 12:01 this morning, we moved from what's affectionately known as the red phase into the orange or moderate phase. And the whole point behind this is to allow additional economic opportunity while still protecting the health and safety of Utahns. So for business owners, first of all, I would say, please visit coronavirus.utah.gov. There's a section there for business. You can click on the Utah Leads Together 2.0 plan. Within the plan, there is a 20-page addendum that has been worked on tirelessly by industry associations and leaders, members of the task force, to put together best practices when it comes to operating a business in this environment. So, you know, restaurants, retail businesses, all of those things. But when we look at what's really changed going from red to orange, the things that stand out the most are the ability for in-house dining in restaurants. And again, all of these have very specific regulations around social distancing. We still need to maintain 6 feet between patrons. We need to make sure that workers are wearing masks, that workers are screened for signs of illness when they come to work every day, so that we're still protecting the health and safety of Utahns. Mass gatherings, the limit has gone from 10 to 20, so that's a change. And importantly, though, we still want to protect those that are most vulnerable. So, yep.
Can you clarify what you just said about mask gathering? Can you just clarify that?
Sorry, mass gatherings. Mass, yes. Okay. We talk a lot about masks, mass gatherings. So limit was 10. Under the federal guidelines and the state directives, that has now been moved to 20. And so again, this is, and I want to be clear that as we move from one area to another, this is more like, as the governor said many times, more like turning a dial than turning on a light switch and going back to the way things were before. So we're going to be watching those metrics very closely. But those are the big changes. Now, again, if you are, you know, elderly or have underlying health conditions, you're still going to want to be in that red segment. We want to be very careful. If you can work from home, still work from home. We want to limit contact as much as possible. We're encouraging, if you are out in public and around other people, to please wear masks. And a lot of disinformation, misinformation around masks. Again, the masks don't prevent you from getting the illness as much as they do prevent you from spreading the illness. And so if everyone is wearing it, then it has the effect of again, like being inside, preventing those droplets from leaving us and getting out and impacting the rest of society. So all of those are important. And the other thing I want to say, though, very quickly, is we have significantly, what we've been doing over the past 6 weeks is ramping up our testing and tracing capacity, which now allows us to do a very specific testing and then tracing those who, if someone tests positive, figuring out everybody they've come in contact with and getting them tested as well, even if they're asymptomatic. And that's going to help us to take a much more surgical approach to isolating those who have the disease, still slowing the spread while allowing people to be out in public more than we were before. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, so just two quick questions on that. Go back to antibody or testing. Antibody testing, when do you think that's going to be rolled out? When can business owners get access to that to give it, to help gain access for their employees to that testing? Antibody testing.
Yeah, so we do have some good news. I was just up at ARUP yesterday. That's the University of Utah's one of the biggest labs in the nation, and they have rolled out their antibody test now. There's a lot of, again, misinformation around antibody testing. Unfortunately, with antibody tests, there's still a high false positive and high false negatives around this, as high as 5%. For the ARUP test, it is an actual blood draw. And but they are rolling that out now. We will have access to thousands of those a day. And our first focus is going to be amongst healthcare workers and those in our long-term care facilities. And we are also doing a big study, a randomized study, testing of 12,000 Utahns to try to understand how widespread this disease already is and help us make better decisions. But over the next few weeks, you will see the prevalence of antibody testing being made more available, widespread. And now, ultimately, we would love to have the finger prick tests. There have been a couple of those that have been approved preliminarily by the FDA, but they still need to be validated. And so we will be using capacity at the lab at the University of Utah to validate those tests. So what we'll do is we'll get some of the finger prick tests. We'll have a bunch of people test that way and do the blood draw, and then we'll compare the two together to make sure that they maintain a good level of accuracy. And so really, that's going to be happening over the month of May. I'm hopeful that by June we have widespread finger prick testing for businesses, which will be helpful. And again, the antibody test only tells you if you've had it before. Unfortunately, we don't know how much immunity comes with this disease because it is novel. There's still a lot of studies going on about that. We do believe that there is some immunity. We don't know how long it lasts or how prevalent it is, but it would be helpful to know if we've already had it.
Great. One question from online, just real quick on testing. Right now, there's a lot of testing capacity for if you think you have coronavirus, right? If you're showing symptoms or signs. Are we at the point where anybody can get tested that wants to get tested?
So we're not quite there yet, but let me tell you, we do have some excess capacity, and I can share very quickly how we're going to use that excess testing capacity in smart ways. Now, again, getting tested just randomly to see if you have it. Well, we could do that for everybody. The truth is that that's not very helpful because all it tells you is that you don't have it right now, but you may have it tomorrow. And so what we're going to be doing with that extra testing is using it for our testing and tracing. So if you've been in contact with someone who has had the disease, then yes, even though you don't have symptoms, you can get tested. That's one of the areas we're opening up. We're also going to start testing all of the workers in our long-term health care facilities, because this is where half of our deaths right now, 48 or wherever we are, about half of those have come from our long-term care facilities. So that's one area we want to work with. We will also be working with critical infrastructure to get employees in critical infrastructure areas tested as well. So we're strategically using that excess capacity that we have right now to make sure we can maintain economic opportunities.
Good. Well, okay. Well, we'll because of time, we'll pause and on the testing. I'm sure you've probably, how many times have you said the word test in the last month? I guess you've probably set a record. Could be a very interesting statistic.
It's all I talk about, and it's good. We want to talk about it.
But just a final point on that: anybody who wants to get tested should go to testutah.com and fill out the survey, and they're really making that available to a very broad group of people. So anybody listening that wants to get tested, go to testutah.com. Transitioning now to the economy. Miles, if you could talk to us just a little bit about the work that you're doing in the governor's economic task force, and how federal resources are being made available to companies. We've talked about the PPP a lot, so let's not talk about the PPP or the EIDL right now.
Yeah.
But anything else that that you think is relevant to business owners would be helpful.
Absolutely, Arian, and you're right. We've talked a lot about the CARES Act at this point, and when it comes to federal engagement, right now the CARES Act is continuing to be the primary focus. And so, just for the sake of time, just to reiterate to anybody out there, if you haven't applied for PPP yet, if you're a small business, get on, apply right away. If you have applied, but for some reason it's stuck up in the system, go to coronavirus.utah.gov/business. Click the link to the rapid response team. They are there to provide one-on-one assistance to you to help troubleshoot the issue for you. The other thing as it comes to federal engagement, there are tax benefits, significant tax benefits. I know, Arian, last week, I think it was, David Karlbach from World Trade Center Utah was on to talk about the tax benefits. Again, hopefully people are looking at that. Key takeaway from today, if you haven't looked at it yet, look at it. Go to the website, coronavirus.utah.gov/business. Look at the tax benefits because they can be significant for businesses, and it's something that we don't want people to miss out on. And the third thing, which is really important, at this point, a lot of businesses have applied, received PPP loans. That number is, from the first round, was 24,000 Utah small businesses. I believe we're approaching about 30,000 at this point as we go through the round 2 funding, totaling, over $4 billion. The key aspect of the program is receiving forgiveness. So getting the loan, that's the first step, but it's not sufficient to benefit from it. You need to make sure that you're keeping good records of how you're spending that money and that you are staying in the loop on what the process will be 8 weeks from now to start applying to get those qualifying expenses forgiven. So again, Arian, this will be a continuing conversation. A significant focus for us is to make sure that the companies who benefit of that $4+ billion that's coming to the state, we want as much of that as possible to be forgiven to help small businesses. The other thing, and the thing that is maybe even more important now as we move from the urgent phase to the stabilization recovery phase, is that Utah, we all need to recognize that Utah is doing very well relative to other states and other countries. That's a combination of great leadership, great policy, and a lot of good fortune as well. Because of the success that we're having, we now are in a unique position where given the global disruption that is occurring in the economy and other markets, Utah companies have an opportunity to jump in, to re-engage, to look for new opportunities to provide their products and services to generate new revenue. And that new revenue is going to be the long-term driver of our economic recovery. And so we want to make sure that businesses are aware that there are many resources available to help them identify these new opportunities in global markets. Just in the past few days, World Trade Center Utah, we did a series of webinars with our partners in the United Arab Emirates, focused on entrepreneurship, technology, life sciences, aerospace and defense, as well as energy and energy tech, clean technologies. We did a webinar with the Saudi Ministry of Investment to look at opportunities there. We are working on other programming with Israel, Canada, Australia, and China. And so now is the time for companies, as we figure out how do we survive, working with everything the Lieutenant Governor is talking about and getting back to work, what are those opportunities? And let's use this global economic disruption and the strong position Utah is in now to go out and help our companies win market share away from companies who've had to retreat a lot more because their areas are not faring as well as Utah has fared up to this point in the crisis. And so that's something that we want to continue to work on. And with your community, Arian, the last thing I'll mention is World Trade Center Utah, we manage grants for small businesses. And so as they look at these opportunities, whether it's website optimization, whether it's connecting with the right people in other markets or investors, we have grant funding to help offset those costs, because right now we all know that cash flow is a major, major challenge. Let us use our grant funding to provide some of the costs associated with going out and identifying those opportunities and taking advantage of them.
And what's the website to find out more on grant funding?
For the grant funding, WTCutah.com. And on there, there's a grant page and lots of information there. We're working with on a couple other programs to even grow our grant programs more.
All right, Margaret, what do you know, as we look at the role of, we've had a lot of leadership coming from government. What is the role of business now and government working together to sort of create this new normal? How do you see that evolving? And also, what do you think are the biggest changes that are going to happen over the next 2 months that are going to kind of guide that conversation around public-private partnership in this new normal?
Sure, thanks, Arian. It's great to be here. So I guess I'll take the second one first. And that is, I think that part of our new normal is going to be this acceleration of trends that were already happening. And there's sort of been this forced experiment of a whole lot of different things, you know, telework, telehealth, online education, and even social gatherings, game playing, all those things. There's been a forced experiment for that. So now we can look at those things and say, where does this work well and where does it not work well? So I think that's incredibly exciting. I also think that because of this pause, there has been, and many people obviously have had to, you know, have lost jobs or have been furloughed and so forth. But because of this pause, it's allowing a lot of people to rethink what they want to do professionally. They may think, you know what I was doing before, I didn't really like anyway. We already know there was an acceleration of a lot of jobs being sort of automated out, taken over by automation and AI and so forth. So this, to me, gives us an incredible opportunity to allow people and enable people to do the micro-credentialing and upskilling that will enable them to get a new career. Because a lot of jobs will come back, but a lot of them won't. And so when I think about the public sector and the private sector coming together, I think that's where the opportunity really is to be able to the public sector should be partnering with higher ed and other organizations that provide micro-credentialing. And we've got a lot of startups and great ed tech companies in Utah, which is incredibly exciting. We're so well positioned to do this, to be able to give folks that want to change careers or have to change careers the opportunity to do that. And we have these great private sector organizations that can help, such as Silicon Slopes and the Chambers of Commerce and so forth, that could really be that kind of the other partner in the matchmaking process. And so there's a lot of bad news, but I think the acceleration of certain trends are going to potentially be good news for people as we move forward, and maybe exciting times.
Oh, it's a great comment. Spencer, what do you think about that? And what's the role of the state in accelerating that?
Well, look, you know, I'm not sure people have really gotten their arms around the economic damage that has been done here at home, across the country, and really globally. And so we have a role to play in helping make sure that there are jobs to go back to, right? I mean, that's the critical piece, and where I think people have missed out. You know, when 70% of those that have applied for unemployment right now are furloughed, which is good news. That means at least theoretically they have a job to go back to. But jobs go away quickly and come back slowly. And so we do have a role. And of course, the federal government is playing a big role through the CARES Act. But as a state, these are the conversations that we're having, and we're having with legislative leadership who controls the budget. But we're looking every day at every one of these subgroups. Where are we seeing the most economic damage, and what can we do to stabilize that in some way so that it comes back quickly? Some good news, you know, we did have the most diverse economy in the country before this happened. We had the lowest unemployment in our state's history before this happened. So the foundations were good, and we have the ability to build very quickly. In fact, we saw a memo out of the White House that had Utah as one of 6 states that they felt would lead the economic recovery. But it's not going to happen by accident. It's going to take concerted effort and all of us pulling together.
So Spencer, we've got a lot of folks listening. Over 200 people are listening right now. And a lot of them are small businesses, and a lot of them are small businesses in tech. And as you know, The tech ecosystem has been fueled by private investors, some formal investors like venture capital groups, but a lot of friends and family who have put up a couple $100,000 to get a business going or to keep a business going. How is the state going to support that process with private investors? How can we partner between private and public capital to stimulate and accelerate the recovery for these early stage businesses?
You know, so the state did more of that several years ago. There were some fits and starts in those in the conversations and actually in execution in doing that, and since has kind of pulled back as the economy was strong, and we were seeing you know, funders come into the state of Utah, and that's been a big change. I think that is a discussion that is definitely worth having again. And I want to be clear, though, you know, government didn't build this incredible ecosystem. As somebody who came from the private sector, I get a little defensive and don't want to take credit for what was done by those families and those neighbors and those friends and those investors and those incredible entrepreneurs that sacrificed so much to build up this tech ecosystem. By the way, we've led the nation. Actually, I guess we're second in jobs in tech over the last 10 years. Washington State beat us barely, and that's mostly driven by Amazon. What happened here is much more organic, and it is those small investors who have really put their heart and soul into making this happen. But I absolutely do believe that there is a way and an opportunity for government to partner. And that's something we're interested in, reviving those conversations. Again, I will say the past 6 weeks, everything has changed so very, very quickly as we're trying to get our arms around that. But that is definitely a piece of recovery that we need to talk about.
So I'll just say I chair a subcommittee for the Economic Impact Committee for Silicon Slopes. Jeremy Andrus chairs the Economic Impact Committee, and we have a subcommittee that's been focused on developing stimulus proposals, both for the state and federal level, that will help early stage startups. So you may have heard of that, but if you haven't, there's something coming your way on that. Margaret and Miles, what can we do to partner public and private capital to support early stage companies?
Arian, I'll share my thoughts real quick, because this is something that World Trade Center Utah has been looking very closely at over the past year. What we've noticed is a couple different trends. One, even when the economy was good, there were many aspects of the tech ecosystem here in Utah, the non-software aspects, they continue to have a hard time finding sources of capital to drive their growth, longer runways, higher overhead costs, and it's been a bit of a challenge, and they haven't, outside of software, Utah has not been as well known nationally and globally as we have in software. The other dynamic has been that as we engage with international investors, it's very easy to convince them why they want to invest in Utah. It's a great economy, all the great work that Governor Herbert administration has been doing over the past 10 years, the private sector has been doing. We can convince them this is exactly where they want to make investments. The challenge is if you're talking to, Mubadala, which is the Emirati Wealth Fund, Sovereign Wealth Fund, they have an office in San Francisco, they're not interested in writing checks if it's less than $100 million. And here in Utah, we need to develop a mechanism where we can find partners like that who can write bigger checks without doing the due diligence into exactly what each of the individual companies that are receiving that funding, but they have great trust in the state of Utah. They have great trust in our ability to drive new innovations and new technologies across the tech ecosystem, software, but everything else as well. And so that's an area where I look forward to circling up, because we need to compare notes and partner on this effort, because there is great opportunity. And if that was true before COVID, it is going to be doubly true now, both in terms of the capital needs here in the state, but also the attractiveness of Utah as a destination for that capital.
Thank you. Margaret.
Yeah, so it's a great question. One of the things I think about a lot as a public policy person is, wanting to be careful that government is not sort of picking winners. So that's something that we have to be cautious of as we're trying to figure out how, the public sector can help businesses. Now, something that Miles said I think is incredibly important, which is that to the extent that the policymakers and the leaders can make sure that Utah is still a great place to live, by a variety of metrics, that's going to continue to attract jobs here. The other thing we obviously have to think about is, these small businesses and entrepreneurs, these are the folks that have gotten the worst hit in COVID, because by the very nature of what they're doing, they have the least amount of margin. And it just feels sad because more and more returns are going to the biggest business. And that makes me feel sad. So whatever we can do to de-risk or lower the risk for both entrepreneurs in getting in and for those investors, especially the smaller investors like Miles was referring to, whatever policy hurdles that are in the way, we need to get rid of those so that we de-risk that.
So Spencer, I know you have a meeting you've got to get to. Would you like to give us your final thoughts on that? What can we do to de-risk things for early stage startup investors and for startups that are trying to hire employees? More than 1,000 startups were created last year in Utah, and those were mostly created by individuals who are pumping money into these companies and building up these new products. What can we do to keep that happening?
Yeah, so I just want to take off of what Margaret said, because she's absolutely right, and that is the most critical piece. Rather than picking winners and losers, it's finding those usually regulatory hurdles that are holding people back and making it impossible for new entrants to markets, making it impossible for people to use innovation in powerful ways. We've certainly seen that. I come from the telecommunications world. We saw it there, and this is a really great time to reimagine. By the way, we did this about 7 years ago when I first became lieutenant governor. We went through every business regulation in the state. We eliminated about 400 of them that were outdated, outmoded, unnecessary. The tendency of government is to grow. We have a good idea. Somebody runs a piece of legislation. We add a program, we add a regulation, and then we forget about it. And 20 years later, maybe it doesn't make sense anymore. Or maybe sometimes there are people with really good lobbyists who are working hard to make sure that new entrants don't come into the market and threaten their share. And government should, while we should be picking winners and losers, we also should not be keeping winners and holding everybody else out and using that as a sledgehammer to stop people from coming in. And that's where I think we can absolutely do more. In this new economy, this has happened all the time, and I could hurry and name a whole bunch of them, where we have had a new business come into the market, find out they can't do what they wanted to do because we have some sort of regulatory piece in place that doesn't allow them to do that. And it doesn't make sense. Consumers want it, but they can't get it. Those are the types of things we can eliminate, and Utah needs to do better at.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and we wish you the best to continue to fight the good fight for us. So thank you.
Thank you.
I will just say I think we're gonna sum up now. Really appreciate the time that Margaret and Miles have given to us. It's an exciting and interesting and challenging new normal. And I know at Kiln next week we'll actually open a new space that we've been working on for about 8 months. Part of our new normal is we've implemented a whole new set of technology solutions to help combat the spread of a virus, including a military-grade HVAC purification system that can neutralize virus on surfaces as well as in the air. And so maybe tech will save us, and maybe government will help save us, and maybe we'll help save ourselves. And I really feel optimistic, actually. It's incredible to see the innovation that's already come and that will continue to come. I hope that the government will not just deregulate, but will actually stimulate. That the government will actually play an active role in stimulating investment into early stage tech companies and startups in general, candidly, product companies, tech companies, service businesses, etc. We need those jobs, we need that innovation, and it's an important part of paving the way forward. Any last thoughts, Miles and Margaret?
I'll just echo what you said, Arian, in terms of the optimism. I think we have gone through an incredibly challenging period. I think the Lieutenant Governor emphasized the fact that we're not out of the woods yet. There is still significant economic disruption and destruction that has happened, and we haven't bounced back yet. But I do see us entering in a period where we can stabilize And then Utah is going to be very well positioned to go out and to come out of this thing with a growth trajectory that I believe will be even better than it was going into this crisis, thanks to the way that we've been able to handle things up to this point and the data-driven, nuanced approach we're going to have moving forward if there are second waves and other disruption to come. So I'm excited and really encourage everybody to stay engaged. Obviously, Keelan's doing a phenomenal job. And if there's anything that we can do on that global engagement, please reach out, where we exist to help small businesses grow and succeed.
Thank you. Thank you, Miles. And thanks for the work you're doing on the Economic Task Force for the Governor. Thanks. Margaret.
Yeah, I mean, I echo your optimism, Arian, and Miles as well. I feel like, you know, this is a really tough time, but there's a lot of pent up desire to make things happen and to do things. And people have gained all sorts of interesting insights in how we can work in different ways. And I think that will spawn so much more entrepreneurship and even social entrepreneurship. I've been seeing a ton of that. As long as we can, like I was saying, try to lower the risk for those entrants, then I think we're really going to be in great shape, because there's a lot of energy. And I'm excited to see how that plays out. Thanks so much for having me, Arian. I love Kiln. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we really are just grateful that as a community, a lot of people have come together. There's been a lot of communication across many barriers and industries and things that have been very positive, actually. Hopefully we can continue to maximize on that good momentum. And last thing is wish everybody a wonderful weekend and hopefully an exciting week ahead as businesses get going again and we start to see the economic recovery move into its next phase. So thank you very much and enjoy a lovely weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Arian.